Welcome back to Midnight Pasta. Tonight's tale may follow you into your dreams. Subscribe if you haven't already. It helps keep the lights off and the chills on. I don't know what's worse, remembering too much or not remembering enough. You hear stories about old mining towns being swallowed by the land, whole communities buried beneath rock and soil, gone overnight. That's what they said happened to Derrick, West Virginia. A landslide in the winter of 1982. One of the worst in the state's history, supposedly triggered by weeks of rain and a structural failure in the hills above town. 163 people died, they said, buried, crushed, lost. And if you drive down Route 31 past Deer Hollow, there's still a memorial cross standing on the side of the road, wrapped in plastic flowers that haven't been touched in years. People slow down when they pass it, but they don't stop. Not even locals. Not even me. Because there's something about Derrick that makes people uncomfortable. And I don't mean just the tragedy of it. I mean, there's this silence. A strange, persistent silence that settles in your chest when you talk about the place. Like the kind that fills a room just after someone says something they weren't supposed to. Like someone or something is listening. I never believed any of that growing up. I mean, why would I? The town vanished 21 years before I was born. My mother was from Derrick. She rarely talked about it, and when she did, she made it sound like a footnote in her past. One of those quaint Appalachian towns where everyone knew your name and your sins, she used to say. She'd moved away in '81, about 6 months before the landslide, after a falling out with her father. I didn't press her on the details. She didn't like talking about him, and I never met him anyway. But once, when I was maybe 12 or 13, I asked why she never visited the memorial. You know what she said? She stared out the kitchen window like she was watching something move in the trees, and said, "Because the town's not gone, it's still listening." She didn't explain. Just went back to washing dishes, like she hadn't said something completely insane. I'd probably still think it was a weird isolated comment, except for what happened last summer. It started when I was helping clean out my Uncle Ray's attic. He passed away unexpectedly, and since I was the only family member with a flexible work schedule, I got the job of sorting through 50 years of dusty boxes and bad insulation. Ray had lived alone in one of those long, single-story ranch homes on the outskirts of Beckley, about 30 miles from where Derrick used to be. The attic was hot and smelled like mothballs and dry rot. The insulation was exposed in patches, and a few of the wooden beams had spiderwebs thick enough to look like insulation themselves. Most of it was junk, old lawn equipment manuals, broken cassette players, decades of Reader's Digest. But then I found a box marked Derrick 1982 in faded black marker. It was taped shut heavy as hell. When I opened it, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Like mildew but colder. Like pages that hadn't seen daylight in a very long time. Inside were a bunch of old photos, mostly Polaroids and wallet-sized school portraits. There were family Christmas cards with faded red bows, brittle newspaper clippings, and a handful of cassette tapes labeled things like Town Hall, MTG3/22, and Church Picnic. I pulled out an old yearbook with the cover half gone, the spine warped and chewed at the edges. And at the very bottom, in a plastic sleeve, was a photo that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a street shot, one of those casual snaps people used to take on disposable cameras. It looked like downtown Derrick. Main Street, some storefronts, a small diner, and a barber shop with a striped pole. In the reflection of one window, there was a figure standing behind the glass, pale, thin, wearing a dark jacket. But it wasn't the person's expression that got me, it was their face. Because I recognized it. It was my brother. My little brother Matt was born in 2003. He would have been -21 years old when that picture was taken. And yet, there he was, right there in the glass, looking maybe 12 or 13, same mop of dark hair. Same narrow face, same small scar above his left eyebrow from where he hit the coffee table when we were kids. At first I thought maybe Ray had just printed a newer photo and tucked it in an old album, maybe as a joke. But the photo was real, a genuine print. The colors were faded, warped with age. The timestamp in the lower right corner said June 4th, 1982. That was 4 days before the landslide. And Matt had never even met Ray. I brought the photo home with me. I showed it to Matt that night after dinner, holding it up and asking, "This look like anyone you know?" He squinted at it, his eyes narrowed. "That looks like me?" "Yeah, that's what I thought." He smiled, but it was the nervous kind. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." He leaned in again. "But this is old. Look at the cars. That's like before we were even born." I nodded. "It was taken in Derek." That's when he got quiet. Matt's not superstitious, but he's sensitive in a way most people aren't. You know how some people just have a sense for when something isn't right? He sat back, ran a hand through his hair, and muttered, "I don't like this." Neither did I. I asked Mom about it the next day. We sat on the porch, cicadas buzzing like static in the trees. She looked at the photo for a long time before speaking. Then, without looking at me, she said, "He shouldn't be there." "Who?" She held the photo tighter. "Matt." Her voice was cold, thinner than usual, like something had pulled the weight from it. "Is it someone who looks like him?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "There are things in that town that remember us." I waited for her to explain, but she didn't. She just went back inside and locked the door. That's when I started doing research. I don't mean the surface level stuff either. I'm talking old census records, local paper archives, survivor interviews, anything that wasn't sanitized for public consumption. And what I found didn't sit right. There were inconsistencies, discrepancies in the number of reported dead. Some names that appeared on the deceased list also appeared in local arrest records or health documents from the late '80s. A few even had tax forms listed. Then, nothing. And then there were the families who refused to attend the memorial. 2 of them gave statements to the press at the time. The articles are hard to find now. Most of them have been pulled or marked as corrections issued. But one quote stuck with me. "The land didn't bury our people. It took them back." I drove through the Derrick site a week later. There's no town, no rubble, just trees, hills, birds chirping like nothing was ever there. But as I slowed my car by an old broken fence line that led nowhere, I swear to God I saw someone standing just inside the tree line, wearing a jacket, watching, and waving. I didn't stop the car when I saw the figure in the trees. I didn't even slow down more than I already had. Just stared too long in the rearview mirror as I passed, heart thumping in my throat like I'd nearly hit a deer. The figure didn't move, just waved. I thought about pulling over, getting out, walking into the woods, but I didn't. Because deep down, I knew if I went in there, something would be waiting for me, and I wouldn't come back the same. I made it back home by dusk. The drive should have calmed me down, but I couldn't shake that image. The shape in the trees, the tilt of the head, the slow wave. Like they recognized me. Like they'd been waiting. I didn't mention it to Matt. He'd already been rattled by the photo, and besides, he was acting off. Quieter than usual. Not scared exactly, just distant. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at nothing, like he was trying to remember something he shouldn't know. At one point that night, I heard him whispering in his room. I figured he was on the phone or gaming with friends, but when I cracked the door open, he was just sitting cross-legged on the floor, facing the window, talking softly. To no one. When I asked what he was doing, he looked up at me with this blank expression, like I'd just woken him from a dream. He said, "Huh? Nothing." And then he smiled, but it wasn't quite his smile. The next day, I went back to Uncle Ray's house. I'd barely scratched the surface of what was in that attic, and something told me, no, something urged me to keep digging. The box with the Derek stuff was still there. I flipped through the rest of it, pulling out anything I hadn't seen yet. One item caught my eye, a folded hand-drawn map on yellowing paper. No markings, no labels, just lines and clusters, roads and shapes, a river. At a small square near the center, with one word written above it in pencil, home. It didn't match the layout of any town I knew, but I took a picture of it and loaded it into a topographic map overlay tool online, lined it up with what used to be Derek before the landslide. It matched perfectly. Only there was no record of a house at that location. Not before the disaster, not after. The land was supposed to be unstable, condemned, government sealed. But the map said otherwise. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up to the sound of footsteps. Not inside the house, outside, on the gravel drive. Just the crunch of slow, deliberate steps, pacing, back and forth. I looked outside 3 times and saw nothing. But the sound kept coming. By morning, Matt was already up, sitting on the porch with a blanket around his shoulders. He looked pale, like he hadn't slept at all. "You hear someone outside last night?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me and said, "I think I've been there before." "Where?" He hesitated, then said, "The town." I drove back out to the woods later that day, not with the intention to stop, but with the intention to see, just to confirm for myself that what I'd seen before was a trick of the light. An overactive imagination. That's what I told myself anyway. But when I reached the bend in the road, I noticed something strange. A path that hadn't been there before. It wasn't a trail, not exactly, but the grass was pressed down, the brush broken in places, like something, or someone, had been walking it regularly. The broken fence I remembered from before was still there, but beyond it the woods looked wrong. Too quiet, too still. And then I noticed something else. A rooftop, just barely visible through the trees. A slanted shape, dark and faded with time. I pulled over and shut off the engine. The air felt heavy, stale, like it hadn't moved in years. I stepped out of the car. The forest absorbed the sound of the door closing. No bird song, no wind, just the whisper of leaves underfoot as I started walking. The house was real. That was the first thing I realized. It wasn't some old hunting shack or tool shed. It was a proper house. 2 stories, shingled roof, front porch sagging inward. The windows were dark but unbroken. No graffiti, no signs of squatters or teens looking for a thrill. It looked preserved, like it had never been touched by time. I stepped up onto the porch, every wooden board groaning like a breath held too long. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. It wasn't locked. The door opened with a sigh, and inside the house smelled warm, like dust and cedar, old photographs and childhood. It smelled like home. I took 1 step in, then another. There was no dust on the floor. The light filtering in through the windows was soft, golden, as if the sun was permanently setting outside. There were no signs of disturbance, no cobwebs or animal nests. But then I saw something that made my stomach clench, a photograph. Sitting on a wooden side table by the couch, it was the same photograph I'd found in Uncle Ray's attic. The one of Derek's Main Street, the one with Matt's face in the window. Only, this time, he wasn't just in the window. He was standing in the street, out front, facing the camera directly. I dropped it, turned, and saw a shape at the top of the stairs. Not moving, just watching. A silhouette, tall, familiar. And I swear to you, it had my face. I didn't run at first. I froze. The kind of freeze where your body won't even tremble because it's too afraid to move. Because if you move, it might move too. The silhouette stood still at the top of the stairs. It wasn't doing anything, not threatening me, not coming closer. But it was watching. That much I felt in my spine. The light from the hallway upstairs spilled just enough to outline the shape. My height, my build, the slouch I'd had since I was a teenager. A shape that could have been a mirror if mirrors breathed. And I swear I heard it inhale. Then something creaked behind me. I turned, and the door was closed. I hadn't shut it. I hadn't even touched it. I backed toward the center of the living room. My heartbeat was so loud I couldn't hear if the thing on the stairs moved. I looked around the space, tried to figure out where the hell I even was. And that's when I noticed something else. The photos on the walls? They weren't dusty old black and whites or yellowed Polaroids. They were current. There was one of Matt sitting on the porch back home, wearing the same hoodie I'd seen him in 2 nights ago. One of me, at work, drinking coffee in the office kitchen. A photo I never remembered being taken. A picture of my parents, both smiling, but their faces were just a little wrong. Like someone had painted them from memory and couldn't quite get the eyes right. And then, next to the fireplace, one more photo. A group photo of a town gathering lined up in front of the old Derrick General Store. Children, parents, elders, all smiling, all waving, all staring directly at the camera. And every single one of them had empty eyes. That's when I finally moved. I didn't run, not yet, but I stumbled backward toward the door, tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. No lock, no latch. It just wouldn't move, like it had fused with the frame. I heard a footstep behind me, the stairs. I spun around. The figure was halfway down. Still my height, still my outline, but closer now. Close enough I could see there was no face. Not really. Just a smooth blur of features, a hint of eyes, a soft shadow where a mouth might go. Like something trying to wear me, but not quite sure how. I started pounding on the door, yelled, kicked it. And then, behind me, I heard my name, but not from the shape, from the walls. I turned around in time to see one of the photos, the one of Matt, shift. Just a little, like it was breathing. His mouth moved in the picture. He said, "Come home." And then his smile twitched wider. Too wide. The floorboards beneath my feet creaked like a groan. Another photo blinked. One of me. And in a voice just barely wrong, like someone imitating me through old speakers, it said, "You've been here before, haven't you?" I don't know how I got out. I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember I was running through the woods, lungs full of ice, branches cutting my arms. I burst through the trees and collapsed next to my car. The air out there was thick, stale. Still wrong. But I can breathe. Barely. I looked back once. The house was gone. Just trees. When I got home, Matt was gone. His room was empty. His phone was on the bed. His shoes were still on the rug. The back door was cracked open. The wind had picked up, dry and electric, the way it gets before a thunderstorm, only no storm ever came. I called the police. They came, asked the usual questions, filed the missing persons report. Did he leave a note? Had he been upset? Was there any history of mental illness? But the officer, a young guy, maybe early 30s, paused when I mentioned the area I'd driven through. "You mean off Route 60?" he asked, eyes narrowing. I nodded. "Don't know why anyone goes out there anymore," he said quietly. "Nothing left. Land's unstable. Did you ever hear of a town out there called Derrick?" He stiffened a little, looked over his shoulder at his partner, then back at me. "Not really. Maybe before my time. There were a few old mining towns in the hills, long gone now." Then he wrote something extra on his clipboard. Didn't show me what. Didn't answer any more questions. It's been 3 days since Matt disappeared. 4 since I saw his face in that photograph. And I can't sleep anymore. Because last night someone sent me a picture. No number, no name. Just an image. Of the same house in the woods. Same slanted porch, same roof line. Only this time, the upstairs window was lit from inside, and silhouetted in the glow was Matt, standing completely still, staring straight at the camera. I didn't show anyone the photo. What could I even say? Hey, look, my missing brother's in a picture of a house that shouldn't exist, in a town that shouldn't be there, staring at a camera that doesn't belong to me. I kept thinking maybe it was a prank, maybe someone was screwing with me, but I checked the photo's metadata. There wasn't any. No timestamp, no file origin, no GPS data. Just blank. Like it had never been taken. Like it had always existed. I started digging, real digging. Local library archives, state records, even a few late-night deep dives into weird internet forums full of people who wear tinfoil hats like their crowns. None of it felt useful, until I came across a mention in an old newspaper scan. A piece from the Herald-Dispatch, dated October 29th, 1982. Governor declares derrick a loss, landslide buries Appalachian Hollow. No photo, just 3 columns of stiff, quiet language. Unrecoverable, total subsidence, minimal survivors. I found the article again 2 days later in another archive, but this time it had one extra paragraph at the end. Families of 6 former residents have declined to attend the official memorial service, stating religious and personal objections. One family claimed the town was not buried but taken. Another said it was still speaking through the ground. Authorities declined to comment. And someone had underlined that last line in red pen. Still speaking through the ground. I found one of the families. Not on purpose. I was back out near Route 60, not far from where I'd seen the old trail. I don't even know what I thought I'd find. Matt? The house again? Maybe something left behind. I pulled into a tiny gravel road when I saw the sign. Hastings Family Cemetery, private land. The name hit me. Hastings was one of the surnames listed in the 1982 obituary memorial I'd come across. I walked the path, unsure if I was trespassing. I kept expecting someone to yell, to tell me to get lost. Instead, an old woman stepped out from behind a tall pine tree. Like she'd been waiting for me. "You look like her," she said. I froze. Like who? She tilted her head, watching me with eyes the color of dirty snow. "You got your mother's mouth. But you talk like your father." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She turned and started walking up a narrow dirt path that snaked along the hillside. "If you're going to ask about the town," she said over her shoulder, "you should at least come in and have tea." Her house was small and crooked. Older than it had a right to be. Wood walls so weathered they looked soft. Inside it smelled like clove cigarettes and wet stone. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone used to avoiding weak floorboards. She poured me a cup of black tea, no sugar, no honey. "I remember the night it happened," she said quietly, sitting across from me. "I was 16. It started with the air changing." "The air?" She nodded, still, dry, thick like honey. The woods went quiet, even the insects. And then, she looked out the window. They said it was a landslide, but it wasn't. It was the town sinking, real slow, like something underneath was swallowing it. The ground didn't shake. There wasn't any warning, just homes vanishing below the tree line, one after the other, silent as a breath. I couldn't speak. She continued. "People talk about the ones who were lost, but they don't talk about the ones who didn't stay lost." My chest went cold. "You mean?" She finally looked at me again. "They come back, not all at once, and not like they were. Some come through the woods, some show up in photographs, some just stand in places they shouldn't." I thought of the house. The photos. "But what do they want?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She sipped her tea. "To be remembered." A pause. Then, and to pull others back with them. As I got up to leave, I asked her one last thing. If the town's still there, how do I find it? She didn't answer at first. Then she handed me a scrap of paper, yellowed and folded in thirds. On it, a hand-drawn map. Lines sketched in pencil, a trail marked in red. And 3 words beneath it. Only the lost. She added, you won't find it by searching. You only see it when something's missing. A person. A part of yourself. Or both. And then she shut the door. That night, I checked my phone. Another message. Another photo. But this time, it wasn't the house. It was me. Standing at the edge of the trail. Only I wasn't in the photo. I was reflected in a window, just barely. And behind me, watching from the trees, was a child's face. Pale. Blank. Smiling. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, staring at that photo on my phone, the screen dimming every few minutes, asking me if I was still there. Yes, still here. For now. The reflection was unmistakably me. Same coat, same backpack, but I hadn't taken that picture. And the boy in the woods, his face didn't match any of Matt's photos from childhood, but it felt like him, or something that had studied him too long. I checked the metadata again. Nothing. Of course. No date, no time, no device info, just an image that shouldn't exist. I waited until morning before I left. I packed water, a flashlight, a knife I'd never had to use before. I left a note for my parents that just said, taking some time, don't worry. I told myself it was true. The map the old woman gave me wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. Somehow I knew exactly where to start. I drove east, past Ashland, through a small turnoff near Hurricane, past old fields where tree stumps grew like grave markers. The road narrowed, became gravel, then mud. Finally, I found it. The trailhead. No signs, no markers, just a narrow path cutting through heavy brush, half hidden behind drooping pines. I stood there for a long time before stepping in. Everything changed the moment I crossed beneath those trees. The air dropped 10 degrees, the sounds of birds, bugs, traffic, gone. Even the sunlight dimmed, like it had been filtered through something thicker than clouds. I kept walking, and as I did, I started noticing things. A child's boot, half buried in moss. A rusted tricycle, tipped sideways in the undergrowth. Names carved into the trees, not just initials, full names. Dozens of them. Some I recognized from the obituaries. Some were my classmates. Some were mine. I nearly turned back. I thought of Matt, his voice, his laugh, the way he whistled off-key when he was nervous. And then I saw it. Not in the distance, but to my left, through the trees, just barely visible, a chimney. Standing alone in the forest. Then a wall. Then a house. The same house from the photo. It looked old, but not ruined. The paint was weathered, but intact. The windows clean. And inside, movement. I stepped closer. The front door creaked open on its own. Not like it was pushed. Like it had been waiting. I called out, "Matt?" No answer. I stepped inside. The floor didn't creak. The air inside wasn't stale. It smelled fresh, like pine needles and rain, like the forest had been growing inside. There was no dust, no cobwebs. A fire flickered in the hearth, faint but real, and on the mantel, photos. Black and white, sepia, color, all different ages, all different people, and in the center, one photo in a cracked silver frame. Matt. And me. Only I was older. Older than I am now, wearing a coat I don't own, with tired eyes, staring out like I knew exactly what this place was. A sound upstairs. A single footstep, then another. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step sinking quieter than it should have. At the top, a narrow hallway. At the end, a door slightly open. I walked toward it. My hands were shaking. My breath felt too loud. I pushed the door. It opened onto a small bedroom, and sitting on the bed, cross-legged, was a boy. 7 or 8, too pale, too still, and he looked up at me with Matt's eyes. But older. Older than me. "Hey," he said, voice soft. "Took you long enough." I stood frozen in the doorway. I saw your photo," I said. He smiled faintly. "You saw a lot of things." "What is this place?" He tilted his head. "It's where the town went. The people, too. We're not dead exactly, just quieter now." "Why?" I asked. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they remembered us wrong." I stepped closer. "Matt, I want to take you home." He looked out the window. "Too late for that," he said. And then, behind me, I heard the sound of dozens of footsteps. Soft, wet, uneven. I turned. The hallway was filled with people, children, adults, all silent, all watching. Some were missing parts, arms, eyes, color. Some looked too real, too still. And one by one, they started whispering, "We remember you. Come home. You're part of us now." I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. The hallway was filled with them, figures in faded clothes, skin pale and too still, eyes that didn't blink. They whispered in unison, though their lips barely moved. "We remember you. You were always meant to be here." The boy, Matt, just kept sitting on the bed, watching them, watching me. "They're not mad," he said, almost like he was apologizing. "They just get lonely." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What do they want?" He gave a small shrug. "To be known, to be remembered, right?" I stepped back into the hall, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The people didn't move toward me. They just stood there, watching. And something about the way they looked, it was like I could almost recognize them. Not their faces, exactly, but something deeper. Like their shapes had been blurred into childhood stories. Old fears, forgotten classmates. A woman who used to walk the street with her umbrella, even when it didn't rain. These weren't just the people who lived in the town. They were the memory of the town, and I was standing inside it. I turned and ran. Down the stairs, past the fire still crackling in the hearth, out the front door and into the trees. But the forest had changed. The path I'd come in on was gone. There were more chimneys now, dozens of them, rising from the ground like crooked teeth. Some still had homes attached. Some stood alone, fireplaces burning with no walls around them. And in the distance, I could hear voices. Children laughing, someone chopping wood, a woman singing softly in a language I didn't know. None of it made sense, but I couldn't stop running. Eventually I found the edge, or what passed for one. There was a clearing, dead leaves, a stillness that felt wrong even for this place. And in the middle of it, a figure. He looked exactly like me. Same coat, same backpack, same terrified expression. But when I stepped closer, he didn't move, just flickered. For a moment, he looked like someone else, then back to me, then someone else again. A boy, a woman, an old man, a dozen people cycling through the same frame, a memory wearing different skins. And then it whispered, "You stayed too long." I backed away, slowly. Then I ran again. I don't remember finding the trail. I don't remember the drive home, but I remember the sound of whispers following me. For days afterward, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces, heard the words, "We remember you. We remember wrong." A month later, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside, a single photo, me and Matt, standing in front of that house. Only now I was older, Matt was younger, we both had our hands pressed to the window, like we were trapped behind it. I haven't gone back, but sometimes, when the wind's right, I swear I can hear the laughter again, coming through the trees behind my house. And last week I found something on my nightstand. A crumpled piece of paper, the same kind they used in grade school. On it, in messy handwriting, "Remember me better next time." The days started to stretch on, each one slipping into the next, like time itself had forgotten how to hold its shape. I couldn't ignore the whispers anymore. They weren't just in my head. They followed me, wrapped around the edges of my thoughts, lurking in the spaces between waking and sleep. They found me in my apartment, in my car, in the quiet moments before I could fall asleep. Each time they felt closer, more insistent. I knew I wasn't supposed to go back, but it didn't matter. A few weeks passed, and one evening I found myself at the edge of that same forest again. I didn't even remember driving there. My hands were on the wheel, but it was like my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't reach. The trees were taller now, twisted with shadows, like they had been waiting for me. The dirt road led me to the same place, the place where the house had stood. But it wasn't there anymore, not in the way I expected. The air felt heavy, like it was full of something I couldn't see, but I could feel. It pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. I stepped out of the car. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't stop. The forest swallowed the sound of my footsteps, and then I heard it. A voice, clear and sharp, cutting through the silence. "You shouldn't have come back." I froze. It wasn't the voice of a child. It wasn't Matt. It wasn't anything I recognized, but it felt so familiar, like a memory I couldn't quite place. I turned in circles, but there was no one there, only the trees, the oppressive quiet. "They're waiting for you." I turned toward the sound. The trees parted just enough for me to see a figure in the distance, a shadow, maybe, but this time I was certain. It wasn't just an echo. It was alive. I stumbled toward it, and as I drew closer, the figure slowly took form. It was a man, but not in the way I'd expected. He was tall, unnaturally so, and dressed in old faded clothing, clothes that had faded long ago. The fabric hung from his bones like old cloth, his face barely visible beneath the shadows of a hood. He stood perfectly still, almost too still. At the moment I saw him, I knew. He was one of them, one of the lost. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at me, his empty eyes like dark pools. "They don't remember you like they remember themselves," the figure whispered. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "I was here before you, and I'll be here long after you're gone." A chill settled deep in my bones. This wasn't the same forest from before. The air was heavier now. The ground beneath my feet felt hollow, like I was walking on the bones of the place itself. The man reached out a hand, and in that moment I saw something that made my heart stop. His fingers were moving, slow, twisted, like he wasn't quite human. I took a step back. "They can hear you now," the man said, voice barely audible in the stillness. "They've been listening, waiting for you to come back." I shook my head, the words barely making sense. What do you mean?" The man's fingers flexed. "You don't belong to this world anymore," he said, his voice now a low, guttural growl. "You never did." The whispers rose. Hundreds, thousands, voices overlapping, none of them distinct, but all of them familiar. The voices of people I should have known, of people who should have been gone. I tried to run, but the path had vanished. The trees had closed in on me, and the man, he didn't move. He didn't need to. He was already there, right in front of me, standing in my way. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The air around me turned thick with the scent of something burning, old wood, decaying leaves, and something sharp, metallic. The man's lips parted. "You came back," he said, "and now we're all together again." Then everything went black. I woke up in my car, alone. The sun was setting, but the air felt heavy. The trees outside were twisted, gnarled, like they were no longer part of this world. And I realized as I stared at the road ahead of me that I couldn't remember how I got back. I didn't even know if I was still in the same town, but it didn't matter anymore. The whispers were still there, and they were never gonna stop. That was weeks ago. I thought I was free, but the voices haven't gone away. They're always with me now, always watching. I looked through my phone again, the photo, the one with Matt in the window. I went back to check the metadata. This time I wasn't surprised to find the same thing. No date, no time, no device info, only an image of us, trapped. And me staring out from the glass, wondering when I'd stop being part of the world that still remembers me. I don't think I'll ever leave. They remember me now, and I belong to them. That wraps up tonight's pasta. If your lights flicker, don't blame the wiring until the next shadow creeps in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps more than you know. And if you liked the story, don't forget to hit the like button. In the comments below, share your own horror experience. I'll be reading after midnight. Good night. See you again tomorrow.